take the roll call.
All right, Donahue.
Here.
Cryer.
Here.
Bowen.
Here.
Dallas Elliott. Myers. Nowacki.
Present.
Pengilly.
Here.
Rayburn.
Here.
Okay, seems like we're good there. The next order of business is to review the minutes and take a vote on that. Does anybody have amendments or corrections to the minutes from our last meeting? Oh,
No.
all right. Hearing none, would anybody like to submit a motion to approve the minutes from the November 2nd meeting?
Also moved.
Is there a second?
Approve the minutes from our recent meeting as stated.
I'll second it.
Excellent. Thanks so much. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. I think we did confirm that we have a quorum here, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, the minutes are approved. Sounds great. We can move on to new business, or pardon me, the second agenda item under new business. I think I'll turn this over to Lisa for the improvement project.
Sure, thanks, Chairman Don Hughes. Committee members, I'd like to invite Martha Brayback up to go through this application that we received from Boise State, and she'll kind of give you the details. Are you kidding then?
Yes,
If you want.
what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to present about this project with Boise State University. The main deliverable of this project will be an interactive map of PUNCTUREVINE hotspots. And what this will do for the city of Boise as well as other partners is provide a guideline on which that we can do treatments. In the past, PUNCTUREVINE treatments have been largely reactive, meaning there will be some sort of call to Ada County weed control that will result in a notification that the city of Boise reacts to, and it's reactive. And these treatments are never effective because a reactionary treatment is often long after the plant should be treated. So once seeds are already on the plant, spraying with herbicide or even hand removal doesn't result in effective treatment. And then finally, these treatments have largely been buckshot approach across the city. So we react to where there's issues, but there is no thoughtful planning, nor is there an opportunity for partners to work together to utilize some sort of strategy. And so this map will allow for us to strategize and develop PUNCTUREVINE treatments where they're going to be most effective. Also, what's really interesting from my perspective about this project is that it utilizes science to guide decision making. And science, data, and evidence are central to developing sound policy as well as providing equitable policies. And this map will really allow us to do that. And then finally, I think another thing that's really interesting about this map is that it will allow us to reduce pesticide application across the city as well, whether it's on our property or other partners, because proactive treatments can utilize different integrated pest management techniques, which may not always be chemical based. And so not only does this allow us to actually have a plan, but it also allows us to use more effective treatments in the long term, and then provide this equitable piece so that treatments can be dispersed where they are going to be most needed. Next slide, please. There was a pilot study that was conducted in 2020, and the results from that study are about to be published in Ecological Solutions and Evidence, which is a scientific journal. And what Dr. Coughlin did was look at what factors result in PUNCTUREVINE hotspots. So the map on the right is a picture of property values, and the spots are where samples were taken. So where there was PUNCTUREVINE or where there wasn't. And what Trevor Coughlin found, utilizing science, which was pretty cool, is that bare ground and property values directly correlate to PUNCTUREVINE hotspots. So where there's lower property value and bare ground, that means that there could be a PUNCTUREVINE outbreak there. This was also particularly interesting because only 2%, less than 2% of the area surveyed was suitable or had this habitat suitability for goat heads. And so what that means is that there is truly hope utilizing science to eradicate puncture-vine from the Boise city limits. That's often seemed like a really lofty goal, but science would say otherwise. Next slide, please. Finally, targeted spatial control is what it does is targeted control looks at a habitat suitability map. And then you can overlay habitat suitability with other layers, like, for example, the Pathways Project. And that, once again, will target treatments in areas where they will be most effective. Here is a map of a targeted control map in Toronto that was developed for different invasive species. So this is what the map will look like once it's developed for the city of Boise. So it doesn't, it's going to be across all properties. It's going to be the Boise city limits. Next. And finally, what's important to note is that this is not going to be a reactive map, meaning it's not going to show just where there is puncture-vine. It's going to show where there are potential puncture-vine hotspots, so where the habitat is ideal for puncture-vine to occur. And what this does is, once again, allows that proactive treatment approach, where all the treatments won't be just reactive, that they'll be proactive, and chemicals may not even be needed. We might be able to hand remove puncture-vine in areas where there could be a potential hotspot, and then be able to do most effective treatments in lieu of just doing this reactive treatment approach that we've utilized in the past. Important partners are going to be the Weed Warriors program, which is a program that I facilitate, but also Ada County Weed Control, who is our noxious weed manager here at Ada County. And so we're going to work together with Boise Bicycle Project, as well as perhaps energize our neighborhoods, or different HOAs, different neighborhood associations. Lots of those people come to me wanting to know where to remove puncture-vine. This map will help them identify the best spots to do so. Next slide. This project meets a lot of conservation criteria. As you can see, critical open space, which is identified in the America Beautiful Initiative, as well as protect native ecosystems. Something that I think is really important is that the America the Beautiful Initiative calls for the utilization of science to guide land management. This does directly that. There's also an equitability piece, which is really nice, that allows us to use our limited resources and place them equitably across the Boise city limits, regardless of property ownership and with collaborators. And finally, and perhaps most, this project directly points to, next slide, to language in the Pathways Project. This is language directly screenshotted from the Pathways Plan. And that link at the bottom shows a map of goat head infestations in Salt Lake City. However, that map is a map of where there are currently infestations. So this new map that we're talking about trying to develop is going to be this habitat suitability map, which will identify hotspots, not just where we know there's puncture-vine, but where there could be puncture-vine. So this will allow this unified, cohesive, collaborative approach to removing puncture-vine in lieu of this reactive strategy that we've currently been using. The total direct costs are $85,000 approximately, and the request to the levy is $56,000. There's going to be a match from Boise State as well as from Parks and Recreation, the open space budget. And like I said, the deliverables will be this interactive map, as well as this equitability study, where we'll look at identifying areas where puncture-vines, where we really need to utilize puncture-vine controls and where it's impacting the community. And the map will be used in collaboration with Ada County Weed Control local partners to have a strategized, cohesive approach to removing puncture-vine within the city limits.
Community members, one thing I wanted to share as well when Martha and I have been talking about this project is, I think what's great about it is it's not just a tool for us to use, like Martha said, this is going to be able to, a tool that the community can use. So Boise Bicycle Project can go to looking at Goat Head Fest and not just kind of send people out throughout the city hoping that they're hitting these hotspots, but be able to really use this. Same with Ada County. So the output will be able to be used by lots of different people, not just us. So it's not just on Martha to kind of implement these treatment plans. And I think that's a really big piece as well. Any questions? You guys have any thoughts, questions?
long will it take for all good heads to go away?
So the map will be available for utilization in 2024. And so PUNCTUREVINE seed longevity is only 3 to 5 years. So I don't want to make something that you're going to hold me to, but I would think that there could be very effective control in place 10 years from now. Yeah.
Can you talk more about how this will allow us to lower the amount of pesticides we'll be using and what pesticides will be used?
So right now, herbicide application to PUNCTUREVINE is typically once the flowers have formed and the seeds have been identified, and the seeds are out, okay? And those are the seeds that stick to your tires and all of the above. So if you spray that, the seeds still remain on the landscape. So the spraying, it's completely ineffectual because the seeds are still already formed, the seeds are out there. What this will allow us to do is to use integrated pest management techniques. Like, for example, if there's a spot that's identified as a hot spot, we could mulch it. Mulch has also been shown to be an effective treatment against PUNCTUREVINE. So if we mulch that spot and never allowed PUNCTUREVINE to colonize that area, we could eradicate that hot spot identified by the map without using any herbicide at all. And also what this could help us do is identify areas where we should treat PUNCTUREVINE early, so before the seeds have formed, before the flowers have formed, and then that can be effectively hand removed, hand raked, hand hoed, and then if those seeds never get into the seed bank, then the PUNCTUREVINE will come back in subsequent years. So I think there's a variety of different mechanisms that we can utilize that are not chemical to stop PUNCTUREVINE using this map. And also there is also herbicides that are pre-emergent, so that's still chemical, but they have longer residual in the soil, which could be problematic for people depending on your view on herbicides, but that allows us to do one application and walk away for the long term in lieu of spraying glyphosate or other pesticides that are controversial on an infection treatment. But I think what's really exciting is the integrated pest management techniques that we could utilize that are not chemical in any way, shape, or form. Mulching, even replanting, restoration. We could do native plantings in areas where there could be PUNCTUREVINE outbreaks, and then those native plants can provide competition. So there's a lot of different tools in the toolbox.
I'm curious why property value was used as a determining factor.
So he looked at and I would highly recommend looking at his proposal, but he looked at a variety of different factors, and property value associated with bare ground together, the interaction of those two were directly correlated with whether or not there was PUNCTUREVINE. And it wasn't any of the other factors that he looked into. And from my perspective, and I don't, this is perhaps a question for Trevor, but people with lower property values often don't have the resources to deal with noxious species on their properties or adjacent properties. So if you live someplace with a lower property value that's next to a canal, perhaps you just don't have the financial resources associated to deal with those outbreaks.
I have a question.
Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, from my personal experience, some of the worst puncture vines are along the canals. Do you have permission to go along the canals and clean them up?
At this point, we do not, and I can tell you that the irrigation districts are one of the major issues that we have, because we aren't allowed to do treatments on their property. But my hope is that we can overlay the Pathways project onto this map and then identify areas that are going to be included in the future infrastructure and start treatments early to stop PUNCTUREVINE in those specific areas. But no, to answer your question, we're not allowed to do treatments on irrigation district or canal property right now. And they do a lot of spraying reactively, just like I was talking about, once seeds have formed, and that's not really very effective. And that's an issue of feasibility from my perspective. And I think that this project will help spread equitable resources in hot spots so that we can reduce issues like that over time.
Matt, thanks for bringing that up. I had a similar question. I think this is a great project. I feel like every fall I have several bikes that get flats and they stay that way for a while until I get around to fixing them. So this is really great. Thanks for putting this together, and I hope the pathways work with our irrigation partners lets us kind of get to those areas that Matt was talking about.
I'm also optimistic that once we have a plan for where to treat and when, that we could work with partners like the Canal District to do treatments, or, Ada County Weed Control often does a lot of those treatments. Perhaps once there's a plan that's cohesive across the city, that we could show treatments need to be done X, Y, and Z. And that could be the impetus for them to do treatments that are more effective.
Was the Ada County Weed Control invited to participate in the funding?
No, they were not. And we could ask, there is in the budget, there is funds associated with paying Ada County Weed Control to do treatments. But no, they did not, they were not asked to get to the funding.
In a way, it probably might increase the pressure or the cost for them over the next few years when the map is complete, but hopefully they have a long enough term view that it will reduce their work in the end.
They were excited about being our partner. They've had a big push internally to work with agencies like the city of Boise to reduce our noxious weed issues. And they were very excited about this opportunity.
I will say, Commissioner Raber, that's a good point. And I think one of the reasons at this stage is that the city will actually own this map and it will be ours at the end of this. So when talking about having other funders come in, that sometimes gets a little tricky. So we looked at them as more of an output partner that can help implement the changes instead of being one on the input.
Could you talk more about the equity part? I think my concern is $56,000 is a lot of money, and like in what we'll be hearing next, and thinking about the fact that that 35% of Boiseans still don't live within a 10-minute walk from the park. I wonder if it would be better to use that money to connect some of those Boiseans to open spaces rather than talking about noxious weeds. But I'm curious your thoughts. You talked about equity. Just want to know.
Yeah. So
Oh, sorry. Could I couldn't quite hear that whole
Yeah, could you
question.
repeat that?
Do you want me to?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So the question was basically to talk more about the equity piece, that we have other projects coming that cost a lot of money, and do we want to focus more on connections versus not just weeds on pathways, I think. And so where does that social equity or the equity piece come? But it's a lot of money for this project.
So my understanding is that within the project, there is the socioeconomic piece where researchers will be conducting a survey to see how and where people are impacted by PUNCTUREVINE. And the rationale and the reason for this is that there's very limited resources associated with doing treatments. And when you have science to guide where treatments are placed, then you can make good decisions about where to spread those resources. And right now we don't have any data to guide where people are being impacted by PUNCTUREVINE treatments the most. There's no, aside from observations and talking to your friends and going on a hike, we don't know where people are being most impacted. And the pilot study in 2020 indicated that property value was an issue, but we wanted to ask ourselves, is it really an issue? And this equitability piece will allow us to identify where people are really being impacted by PUNCTUREVINE and then spread treatments in those areas. Because right now we really don't have any guidance. So, so the equitability piece is really about where to put treatments and why, and then to find out what groups are really being impacted by PUNCTUREVINE so that we can put more resources in the future towards those areas and help people who need to utilize bicycles for transportation, help prevent floods specifically in those areas.
And I think as a side note too, and I think this is in the next piece, but we are at about 5.36 million that's left in the fund currently now. And as you said, there are a couple of projects that we've talked about prepping for, but I just wanted to know that too.
Repeat that number, please.
Go ahead, Matt.
Can you repeat that number, please?
5.36.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Commission members too, I would point out, I think Commissioner Bowen brings up a great concern, but I would also point out that long-term, our pathways connections are going to go across all kinds of different parts of the community, and many of them focused in some of areas where we have a deficiency, where that 35% is lying. And so it makes sense, these two would then connect each other at that point when we're creating some type of pathway connection in an area where we've got puncture-vine issues. It happens to be in an area where we're also deficient in having connections to a park or open space. And we have a major problem.
Yeah.
Actually, I mean, it is a, can you call it an epidemic? I don't know what you call it in your world, but it is really a bad, I mean, if you see what Boise Bicycle Project does annually, it's tons.
Yeah.
And they're just not even scratching the surface at the end of the day, so.
And they were particularly interested in the equitability piece as well, because they want to know where to concentrate, their bike repair efforts and where, they can give kids more bikes, but then they want to ensure that, they want to make sure that investment, works out into the long term. So they want to give kids bikes, but then allow them, make sure that they can use them. And so they're very interested in utilizing the map as well to make sure that, resources are spread where they need to be spread, and that's where the survey will do.
I can share that when I lived by the Morris Hill Cemetery for a few years, and there's a pretty significant refugee population over there, and I would go hang out by the canal with my dog, and there was a little bridge over that canal, but there were two big bare spaces of land, and it was a goat head mess. It was really gross. And I frequently saw, like the kids in the neighborhood in that area playing, but they would get goat heads like in their flip-flops and on their feet. And then I saw multiple people walking through that area with bikes with flat tires because they'd gotten goat heads there. And I would go out periodically and try to, get the goat heads out of there, but it was kind of a losing battle. But I think a lot of those, folks are kind of recreating right in their neighborhood. And so if they get flat tires on their bikes, that bike is kind of out of commission. Like those goat heads make their neighborhood sort of not a place where they can play in the little areas of dirt and where there kind of should be grass or something better. So I think that it's a really nice way to make a lot of those neighborhoods better for the folks that live there until, until we can get them closer to parks and even, of course, after that. So I think that it's like an immediate way to start providing, increasing our equity efforts. So I think it does a good job in that regard. I guess I did have a question about, I've noticed that like on the bench, they've got the, the railroad tracks that come through, and certainly we don't want to encourage people to be walking along the railroad tracks, but kind of there's often like a lot of like weird open fields that aren't maintained in any way near or like on the sides of the railroad tracks that end up being like goat head pathways. Like there's one near my house on the bench, and the goat heads kind of take over from the edge of the railroad tracks and then spread out onto the sidewalk. And I was wondering if those kind of empty railroad corridors are part of the area that the city will be able to start treating.
I can't speak exactly to treatment, but I can tell you that the map will be within the Boise city limits. So it will be regardless of property ownership across all different property types. And so if those areas along railroad tracks are identified as having high habitat suitability for goat heads, there are opportunities to direct volunteers to those sidewalks or direct treatments direct to those sidewalks.
Madam President, I think you're probably prepared to call for a vote on the recommendation moving forward.
That sounds good. Would anybody like to make a motion?
We'll make a motion. I'd love to, but, I would like to move that we approve the use of levy funds for the PUNCTUREVINE eradication mapping improvement project.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
Second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, hearing no objections, the motion passes. Thanks very much. I am excited about that. All right, we'll move on to the Peasley Street connection. Back to you, Lisa.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. This is a great project that we have talked about in this meeting a couple times. The Peasley Street connection is actually just outside our door. So I think that we are familiar with the area. We were lucky enough to work with the Harry Morrison Foundation a few years ago, actually, to design and propose. The foundation paid for the design of this connection, which is essentially a 99-step staircase from the top of South Peasley Street down into Ann Morrison Park. It will not only create a safer way to get from the top of the bench without utilizing Americana or Capitol, but get people directly into the park and onto the greenbelt and then throughout the city. But also will help with ADA crossings. That's a kind of tricky three-way stop there at South Peasley, and we'll just have better ADA connection for street crossing and being able to get around. You can go to the next one. So this is a picture of the stairs. One of the things that I wanted to point out is 99 steps is a lot. It's a super steep area. Each stair needs to have a 7-inch rise. It can't have more than that. And also every certain number of stairs, there needs to be a landing. So one thing that we had talked about with our construction manager was the design of the stairs, and it can't just be a straight steep down. So I just wanted to make sure that we understood it does look like a lot, but it's the safest way to design this. One of the great features about this project as well is the runnel. I know that's kind of a new term for everybody, but a fun thing that I've only seen in a bike shop here as well, but it's a grooved metal lip that's kind of on one side of the staircase. So people can very easily roll their bikes up and down and be able to make that connection when they get to the top of the hill or when they come down and get on the green belt and move. Go to the next one. Thank you.
I have a question about the runnel.
Oh,
That sounds awesome.
Madam Chair.
That sounds awesome. Is there like, I guess I can't see it well enough, but like there's room for like your handlebars, like your wheel, like if your wheel is in the runnel, your handlebars aren't like jamming up against the side of the railing?
Yep, so Madam Chair and committee members, the way that the runnel works is it's angled, and I want to say it's an 8%. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that that's the angle. So it's angled, so as you go up the steps, your handlebars are away from the railing that's on the stairs.
It's awesome.
There you go. So the criteria that we've talked about, definitely this is a connection piece, right? This is something that's going to get over 1,800 people that live up kind of in the Train Depot neighborhood and give them that connection down to the park. One of the things that Committee Member Bowen brought up was the 10-minute walk. So trying to get neighbors to our parks and our pathways, this definitely gets that to happen. So over 1,800 people and 850 households. Again, enhances mobility, outdoor recreation, that ADA crossings up at Peasley will really help. And then also just a great way to work with the foundation and really create some great accessibility to our parks. Projects amount came back, $850,000 is what the foundation is asking for to do this project. Like I mentioned before, the foundation funded the initial design and also is trying to come up with if there's additional funds that they can put towards this too. So, and that is minimal. I'm just saying that there's a concerted effort in the community to keep working towards that. Go ahead. There we go. Any questions that anyone has on this? We've talked about it quite a bit.
So Madam Chair, committee members, I actually used this. I did a presentation for the mayor and city council on the 10-minute walk last night. And I use this as an example of how we have a huge number of homes that are around Ann Morrison Park. But the software we use to determine whether you're within a 10-minute walk does take into account sidewalks and pathways and streets. And it's amazing to see the number of houses just above this that are not included in the 10-minute walk to Ann Morrison Park. Because that software does not pick up a pathway that actually gets you there. You have to come down Capitol or come down Americana to actually access the park. We have the same situation at Molinar Park, for example, out on Maple Grove. It actually backs up across from Maple Grove Elementary Schools, right on Maple Grove. It backs up to a number of houses that are outside the 10-minute walk because those houses have no access from their location. They're literally within 20 feet, but they can't get across a canal over to the actual park. They would have to go out onto 5 Mile and around Victory and then back into Maple Grove in order to access the park. So it's another example that a quick pathway across there would create a connection and add in that area several hundred more into Molinar Park, for example. So it's more, it has a lot to do, obviously, with the 10-minute walk, but it also has to do with just access for neighborhoods to have better access into a park location. The amount may seem like a lot. I had spoken to our foundation and said, I'm putting this over $1 million. And our foundation was hoping that it would be somewhere around $750,000. The design on this that we kicked around about 3 years ago was around 500,000. So I really felt like it would double and be in that 7-figure mark. And so anyway, it is a critical piece to connecting what we consider bench location that does not have access down to the park. So I just wanted to throw out that we've used this as an example of something that we feel needs to get done at some point.
Was this RFP, and if so, how many bids did you get? If you can share, what were they?
I don't have the exact numbers with me. I believe we got Sarah Arkle's actually on the call, and she may be, if she can hear me. Is she still on?
I'm still here.
Sarah, do you know specifics on the bid amounts? I believe we got.
We got 3 bids.
I thought we got.
So fun little side story here. We had 3 contractors show up to the pre-bid and then asked for an extension. So they could have more time to evaluate the process, the project, which we gave them. So we got bids back on the 30th. There were 3 of them. The lowest was, I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but it was somewhere around 700,000. And then we add at this point to every project 40% contingency because we're seeing such variability in materials and labor. And the highest bid was upwards of 1.1 million.
So I assume you took the lowest.
Yeah.
We have to, yeah, state statute.
Thank you. I have to speak. I don't see how the gunnel is gonna work, so I'm just assuming that this is non-final design and that much smarter people than me are gonna figure it out, but I don't know how you make a gunnel work on a 90-degree angle, so that's, just make sure that gets designed properly.
So committee member Raber and committee members, there are construction docs that are done and went out with the bid documents. And so all of the percentages and levels and all of that, all those specs are done. And you bring up a point as well. The rental will go, you will do to a spot, get on the landing, run it up again. So it's not just it's not a straight pathway. You will maneuver your bike up and down. And I think one of the things, I think that this connection will be used by pedestrians, but I think the fun thing about the rental and what makes this even more exciting is that it's a super steep area that now bikes are able to go up and down as well and not have to go out to Capitol or Americana.
Madam President, that is your workout for the day, to go up and down this with your bike.
99 steps.
With your bike.
That sounds great to me. There's been I think Matt and I talked about this at a previous meeting. There's just a really sketchy, weird little goat path that goes down there now. And this is a big improvement. I used to, walk through this neighborhood a lot, and it was always frustrating to kind of be right above the park and not have a decent way down, especially if it was like raining or if it was icy or snowy. So this is pretty neat, but you're right. When it will be a workout to push my bike up that thing, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, address
Chair Donahue and Superintendent, I assume all bikes can fit on the runnel. I mean, like, I'm thinking, can kids bike, I mean, given the relief or handlebar height, all that stuff has been thought of, right? Not just adult bikes and.
Yes, so committee member Elliott, I hope everybody heard that online. Just if different size bikes can fit, and I know that that was taken into account, yes, for all different sizes.
I mean, assuming a child with an adult, or maybe a teen, or, you know, I'm just wondering what the accessibility is for anybody that's not a strong adult to get their bike up and down that.
And I think one of the things that I think about, you know, watching my two kiddos bike, I think number one, they think this is hilarious, but bikes are getting lighter and lighter too. So when you have little kids' bikes that are working to push that up there, I think that it's definitely doable. And the way that the angles are, and I think I said 8%, and again, taking into the 7-inch rise, while it's a very steep area, it is a slow on purpose to get up there, so.
It must be inside the railing. I was thinking it was outside the railing.
Inside the railing.
Okay, so it's along the steps.
Exactly.
So you
I
kind
think I
of
was with
just
you. I
round-
think I envisioned it was outside the railing.
So-
I imagine.
Yeah, it's almost like just push, Madam Chair, Commissioner, just pushing your bike.
Yeah,
You're
okay.
like walking up the stairs while you're pushing.
Yeah.
pushing up the stairs.
So committee
I thought it
members,
was on the other side.
okay, so
Sorry, can we go back to the,
there it is.
yeah.
So you, just run your mouse kind of up. It goes along the inside of the stairs.
Inside of that. Yeah, okay.
So as you're walking up the stairs, your bike will literally just be on the side of you walking.
I thought it
Okay.
was inside of that space between the railings, so apologies.
No, you're good.
I assume these have been used elsewhere.
So
Yeah.
there are other rentals. George's Cycles, actually, they have about 6 steps that you go up, and they have a rental, and it may not be something you've ever noticed before, because if you don't, you take your bike up the ramp. But there is a rental on the side there, just for a visual, if there's, you know, if you ever want to go see.
Pete got me into looking at the image a little bit closer, so apologies.
Thanks.
I'm glad to know about the runnel at George's. I've never noticed it.
If there aren't any more questions, Madam Chair, do you want to call for a motion?
Sure. Would anybody like to make a motion regarding this project?
I'd be happy to make a motion. I would make a motion to approve the use of the $850,000 in levy funds for the Peasley Street Connection Improvement Project.
Wonderful. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
All right, we've got 2 seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, hearing none, the motion carries. It is approved.
And then, Madam Chair, just for the benefit of our foundation folks that are here too, thank you for coming.
Yes.
We appreciate your support. Appreciate you paying for the design. I believe it was $33,000. Yeah, and so we appreciate that. And again, now this will go to council with our recommendation from staff and from the committee to approve. And I'll send a memo to council this week and alert them that it's coming, and then answer any questions, and I'll keep you posted, Vanya, on what the next steps will be there.
Yeah.
Cool, so you're good. You don't have to stick around any further, you can leave whenever you want.
Okay,
Great, thank you guys for coming.
All right, I think the next thing on our agenda is committee updates from Superintendent Lisa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. The one update I just wanted to give. Sorry, I heard people talking. The main update that I wanted to give was on the Boise State soil carbon sequestration project. That work will be started. We actually are getting ready to hire a field tech, a soil field tech, that will work in conjunction with Boise State. So that work will get started this spring, going into summer, and I just wanted to let you know that. And then the next thing that we have is Pete had addressed a question, regarding a ordinance that was passed, and I wanted Doug to be able to speak to that while we were all in.
Sure, great, thank you. Madam Chair, Commission members, Commissioner Pingelly did reach out and just wanted to get clarification on what the park initiative kind of meant and what that does for the city. And if you're all aware that we also went through a process where we placed deed restrictions on every park property that we have as well. So we've kind of got, pardon me? And reserves as well. And so the way we look at this is it is just another layer of protection that some very interested in making sure that future generations, our park and open space is preserved perpetually and is never used for any other purposes other than what it was originally designed for. And that's almost the exact language we put in our deed restrictions as well. So when this came to the council, and Rob's here is going to chime in a second if we need any other advice on this, but essentially when it came to council, they would have two choices. They would either accept the number of signatures which were qualified to put it on the ballot in November, which would be November of 23. They had two choices. They could reject those signatures as a council, which would mean that it would go on the ballot in 2023, or they could accept it as the initiative was written, which is the language I don't have in front of me, but essentially any time, if any time in the future we were to sell, designate, trade, more than 5% or more of any park and would be reserved in this, because reserves already have adequate protection when those were purchased. And we have a contract with the, essentially with the ballot languages with the public on those will stay reserved. So it really doesn't apply in the reserve area. And again, Rob can jump in here. So really we're talking more about the park space in the flatland, but essentially any changes to that park property of 5% or more would then require a vote by the public that would have to approve that particular change. And it really is in place considering mostly sell, like a concern that maybe in the future someone would try to sell park property, a future council, a future mayor in decades from now. And so this is a protection in place that if that ever did occur, it would have to be placed on a ballot and the public would have to vote. City residents would have to vote on that. So the council had the two choices: reject it, let it go on the ballot, and it gets voted on by the public, and then a whole nother issue would occur between the council on deciding whether they still would accept it or not accept it, even though the will of the public voted for it, or they just accept it as is, and that's what they chose to do. So the initiative as it came forward was just adopted as a resolution. And so, excuse me, thank you, sorry. Twice here, as an ordinance, and so it is now in place, and that's basically an extra layer of protection essentially for our park space, and we already have that protection in place for park and open space with our deed restrictions as it stands now. So I didn't know if that answered all your questions. It's not just park, but it also includes the initiative facilities, some other things in park properties. So it would be, like Fort Boise Community Center, for example, I believe would fall under that category if we were to do something different there.
5% of the area or the volume or the cost or what?
The property itself. So if you were talking about, I'm going to make this Ann Morrison Park. If any more than 5% of that park property was to be either sold, traded, passed on to a designee, any of these factors, then it would have to go to a vote with the public. Am I saying that correct?
Yeah. I mean, what about a right of way taking? That's all outside of this? Yeah.
us using eminent domain or?
Or somebody against
Someone
us.
using eminent domain on us.
I believe, I want to recall that there's an exception in there for that. That's generally covered by state code. The 5% really is probably an effort to address when ACHD comes to our door and says, hi, I would like to, you know, there's been some examples where they want to do like a pathway or some sort of like pedestrian improvement, but they want us to give them the property to accommodate that, or other times when there's traffic calming measures, so that we can continue to partner with them. You know, I think it's really important just to note though that, you know, every time this committee authorizes the expenditure of levy funds, and those levy funds ultimately are used, that we do have a robust deed restriction in all of those purchases. So, you know, I think that is a very effective way of holding the property in the public's trust. And you can't get around that with a vote. It's just, you know, it's kind of contractual in nature. And the other thing I had mentioned to Doug when we were talking about preparing for this is, if you want to like a kind of a deeper dive into this, I'd really encourage to go back and listen to the city council remarks, because they were required by law to hold a public hearing on whether or not to adopt or reject the ordinance proposed by the initiative. And so there was a public component where people were allowed to express themselves, but a pretty robust discussion amongst council members as to how they perceived it. And I think just given the business you all are in here, it's worth a rehash, even if you don't listen to the entire thing. But
And Madam President, committee members, I think we could have Joey send a YouTube link
Yeah, that'd be great.
to you all, whether you use it or don't use
Yeah, no,
it
that'd be
for
great.
that particular meeting, and then you can take a look at it.
Just to be clear, this doesn't impact any times in which the city buys land and like creates new public land or new parks, correct?
correct.
Okay, just wanted to-
And if we were to either, you know, whether if we're buying something for open space or park, I'll use Shamrock as an example. We still do deed restrict that, and so we try to be very, very cognizant of the public trust that's been placed in us by, you know, allowing, you know, this levy to go forward, and try to really have a robust protection there.
Thank you. What you read in the press was very confusing, I think.
Yeah, Madam President, committee members, yes, it is confusing, and we had a little, we did the same thing with our commission, just to kind of get, you know, out on the table really what the main points are. And you can dig deeper because the language itself is quite extensive. It's a very solid paragraph, goes into great detail, but even that language in the initiative is kind of what you call broad ranging. It's pretty broad. So, you know, it's hard to pin down exactly what all of the factors are. I think the main part is what the council decisions were. And, you know, now we know moving forward, we've got additional protections on all park and open space, which for all of us in here, we should be very happy with. And it goes on top of the deed restrictions that we've already put in place. So it's really not a bad thing from the standpoint of protecting park and open space, which is really very important. Cool. Okay, Madam Chair.
All right. Thank you for that explanation, and thanks for volunteering to send the link around. I was gonna ask about that. And with that, I think that we have come to the end of our agenda for today. Is there anything else that you need to add?
No, we have nothing else on the agenda, and we don't have exec session.
All right, well, that sounds great. I don't think we need a motion to end the meeting, so we can be adjourned.
Yes,
We
Madam
do.
Chair, we do.
Oh, we
need a-
do. Okay. Would anybody like to move to adjourn the meeting?
Moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Motion passes. We're adjourned.